I wasn't even supposed to be home that night. That's the part that keeps messing with my head. If my buddy Dave hadn't canceled our trip last minute, I would have been up north in a rental cabin, probably half drunk and passing out by a fire pit. Instead, I was alone in my apartment, feet kicked up on the coffee table, binging some show I can't even remember now. It was just after midnight when the pounding started. Not knocking, pounding. I froze. At first I thought maybe it was my upstairs neighbors again. They were always heavy-footed and drunk on weekends. But this was coming from my front door, hard enough to rattle the frame. My heart jumped. I muted the TV and just sat there, staring at the door like an idiot. The pounding came again. 3 sharp hits, then a frantic pause, then more. Whoever it was, they weren't being subtle. I live alone in a second-floor unit of a quiet complex in South Crestfield, a smallish town just outside Chicago. The building's old but decent. Nothing exciting ever happens here, which is why I chose it. That night, though, it felt like all that calm shattered in an instant. I grabbed the wooden bat I kept tucked under my bed. A holdover from my Little League days and a paranoia-driven habit after a close call with a break-in last year. I crept toward the door, keeping my footsteps soft. First thing I did was peek through the peephole. It was Chloe. She lived 2 doors down. Barely ever spoke to anyone, but we'd exchanged small talk at the mailboxes a few times. Her face was a mess. Blood streaked down her cheek and her lip was split. Her eyes were wide and wet, darting over her shoulder like she expected someone to lunge at her any second. I hesitated for only a second before I undid the deadbolt and opened up. She shoved past me and slammed the door shut behind her. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "You gotta get me out of here. My boyfriend, he's trying to kill me." I stammered something, can't even remember what, but she cut me off. "There's no time," she said. "Please, if you help me, he'll kill you too. I swear to God." I didn't know what to think. I didn't know her well, but she looked terrified, bloodied, frantic, shaking. I grabbed my keys off the hook, shoved my phone and wallet into my pockets, and ushered her out. We flew down the stairs, Chloe clinging to my hoodie, her eyes constantly darting behind us. We jumped into my car, and I pulled out of the lot without even checking for traffic. "Anywhere you want me to take you? Friend's place, family, police station?" I asked as I merged onto the main road. "Number, just take me to a motel. Somewhere I can call the cops from. Please." I was skeptical, sure, but I wasn't about to argue. She looked like she'd been through hell. So I drove to this 24-hour roadside motel just past the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon signage and peeling paint. The clerk looked at us sideways, but when I whispered, "Her boyfriend beat her," he just nodded and handed me a key. Room 214. Chloe took the key, mumbled a thank you, then said, "Can you get me some ice?" "For the swelling. Please." I ran to the machine near the vending area. When I got back to the room, she was sitting on the bed, the phone in her hand. "They're sending someone," she said. She pressed the ice to her face, let out this choked sob, and then just unraveled. She cried like her soul was broken. I sat on the edge of the other bed and tried my best to comfort her. Told her she was safe, that I'd stay with her until the cops came. She nodded, sniffled, and wiped her face. "He's always been like this," she said. "But tonight I tried to leave. He came home and saw me packing. Lost it." It all made sense. Her injuries, the blood, the panic. It fit. But as the minutes ticked by, something started to feel off. An hour went by, no police, and we were parked in clear view of the entrance. You'd see sirens pulling in. I asked if she could call them again. She shrugged. "They're probably busy." That's when my gut started whispering that something wasn't right. She was oddly calm now, not frantic, not pacing, not checking the window. And then I noticed the blood again. Her oversized t-shirt was soaked in it. But the injuries she'd shown me, a busted lip, a gash above her eye, enough for a mess, sure. But this? It looked like she'd rolled in a crime scene. "You got other injuries, like a stomach wound or something?" I asked casually. Number, it's just from my face. Liar. The moment she said it, I knew. Something wasn't right. I felt my throat tighten. I think I'm going to call them again, I said, pulling my phone out. She stood. Don't. There was a shimmer in her hand. A knife. I froze. Every cell in my body locked up. Put the phone down, she said. Now. So I did. I've never had a weapon pulled on me. It's like your brain splits in half. Half of it screams run, the other half is just static. She sat back down like nothing had happened. I need you to drive me to the border, she said. Canada. Tonight. We weren't that far, maybe an hour and change from the crossing, but there was no way I was going to become some fugitive's getaway driver. Okay, I said, but I need to eat first. I haven't had anything since lunch. She thought about it, then nodded. Fine, order something, but I'm picking it up. You're not leaving this room. Fair. I opened DoorDash on my phone. My fingers were shaking. I found a late-night pizza place and typed in the notes section, "Please call 911, room 214 at Crestview Motel. Woman has a knife. Urgent." She never even looked over. I kept the screen angled just right, pretended to scroll casually. 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. She opened it. 2 plainclothes officers lunged. One had a taser. She didn't even get a chance to turn around. They cuffed her on the floor. The knife clattered onto the tiles. Turned out Chloe, or whatever her real name was, had stabbed her boyfriend. Almost killed him. He'd managed to crawl to a neighbor's unit to get help. She wasn't the victim. She was the monster. When I got back to the complex the next morning, there were cops everywhere. Blood in the hallway, forensics, crime scene tape across her door. I had to give a full statement. They said I was lucky. If I hadn't called for help when I did, there's no telling what she would have done. It still haunts me. The worst part? I believed her. One sob story, one pair of bloody eyes, and I invited a killer into my car, into my life, into a motel room where if I hadn't played it smart, I might have never made it out. I was 19 the summer I started working nights at the Desert Pine Motel, a rundown little place tucked off the highway about 20 minutes outside of Abilene, Texas. My uncle, Jeff, owned the place and needed someone he could trust for the overnight shifts. I'd just finished my first year of college and didn't want to spend the summer cooped up at my parents' house getting nagged about internships and career plans. I figured a quiet night job, mostly manning the front desk and watching movies, sounded like a sweet deal. For the most part, it was. The guests were usually truckers, couples passing through, or the occasional sketchy loner, but no one ever gave me real trouble. I'd sit in the little office, flip through comic books, eat takeout from the diner across the street, and sometimes sneak a nap between check-ins. The nights were slow, quiet, lonely at times, sure, but peaceful. I've always been more of a night owl anyway. Looking back, it was one of the easiest jobs I ever had, until that one night. It started just like any other. It was a Friday, humid and still, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin no matter how high the AC is cranked. I was halfway through a chicken fried steak dinner and watching reruns of old westerns on the battered lobby TV when the fire alarm screamed to life. It was one of those ear-splitting, shrill alarms that makes your heart jump before your brain catches up. I leapt out of my chair, heart pounding, and saw red lights strobing through the security camera feed. Smoke was pouring from room 12. Shit, I muttered, scrambling to grab the fire extinguisher from the wall. My uncle had drilled it into me from day one. The place was barely insured, and in his words, "If it goes up in flames, I'm screwed, and so are you." I bolted down the corridor, kicked open the door to room 12, and was hit with a wave of thick, chemical-smelling smoke. But the fire itself was small, just a trash can in the center of the room, flames licking the air like a dying campfire. I unloaded the extinguisher, foam smothering the blaze in seconds. "That's it," I breathed, coughing as I waved the smoke from my face. Crisis averted. At first, I was too caught up in the adrenaline to really register anything else. The room looked empty. Bed unmade, window open. I figured the guest had bolted when the alarm started blaring. But something felt wrong. Office. Like the air had more than just smoke in it, like it had a story. My phone buzzed. Uncle Jeff. Tell me you got it under control. He barked before I could say hello. Fire's out. It was just a trash can blaze. No structural damage. Jesus, you're a lifesaver. Check the room over. Make sure the fire department doesn't see anything worth writing a damn report about. We don't need any extra eyes right now. He hung up before I could ask any questions, so I did what he said. I stepped further into the room and took a better look. That's when I saw it. The stuff scattered across the floor. Clothes, small ones, children's clothes, a faded Buzz Lightyear t-shirt, pink sneakers, cartoon underwear, all laid out like someone had unpacked them with care. Among them were crumpled sheets of paper covered in crayon drawings. Curious, I picked one up. It took a second to register what I was seeing. The drawing was crude, clearly done by a child, but the message was horrifying. A small stick-figure kid in a cage, another with tears pouring down its face while bigger menacing shapes loomed over it. One showed what looked like a kid lying on the ground, red scribbles around its head, while other figures laughed. I felt cold despite the heat still radiating from the walls. I backed out of the room slowly, like I was afraid someone, or something, might still be there. Back at the front desk, I checked the registration log. Room 12 had been booked under a single name, Marcus Bell. No other names listed, no sign of children. I stepped outside. A handful of guests had gathered in the parking lot, some barefoot, others in robes and pajamas, murmuring about the alarm. I scanned the crowd. Anyone here named Marcus Bell? I called out. No one answered. People just looked around, confused. A woman asked if it was safe to go back in. I nodded, still shaken. The fire department arrived a few minutes later. I gave them the rundown, careful not to mention the clothes or drawings. I wasn't sure what to think yet. Didn't want to say anything I couldn't take back. After they left, I locked up room 12 and called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them everything. The clothes, the drawings, the guest log. You're telling us one guy booked the room? No kids? One of them asked, shining his flashlight over the scattered items. Yeah, Marcus Bell. That's the name he used anyway. They took statements, photos, and bagged the drawings. One of them, Officer Delgado, lingered behind while his partner radioed in. You did the right thing calling us, he said quietly. We'll look into it. See if the name's real, if anything matches up in the system. But just between you and me, this looks bad. Really bad. I didn't sleep at all that day. When my shift ended, I went home, showered, and just lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The images from those drawings kept flashing in my mind. I couldn't stop wondering who drew them and why. The next few weeks passed with no updates. I kept asking Jeff if the cops had followed up, but he always brushed me off, said they hadn't called, said I was probably overthinking it. Some freak left weird drawings and lit a trash fire. He shrugged. Weirdos are everywhere. Let it go. But I couldn't. Not entirely. Because what if it wasn't just some weirdo? What if Marcus Bell wasn't even the guy's real name? What if those clothes belonged to real children? And those drawings? What if they were confessions, cries for help? Sometimes, late at night, I find myself scrolling through missing persons reports. I don't know what I'm looking for. A face. A name. Something that might tie back to that night. And sometimes I think about another possibility, one that haunts me more than the rest. What if the fire wasn't meant to destroy evidence but to draw attention? What if someone set that blaze hoping the right person would find those drawings? If that's the case, I might have been the only one who ever saw them. Maybe it was a message, a final scream from a silent child, or maybe it was just madness. Either way, room 12 at the Desert Pine Motel has been vacant ever since. Jeff won't admit it, but I think he's too creeped out to rent it out again. And me? I transferred to a different campus the next semester, moved to a bigger city, never took another night job again. But I still wonder what I stumbled into that night, and if someone somewhere still remembers those drawings. I wasn't supposed to take the night shift. That was always Eli's thing. He was older, more patient, the kind of guy who didn't mind reading paperback westerns behind the desk while the rest of the world slept. But he'd caught a stomach bug, bad one, and the boss, Mr. Densley, practically begged me to cover. Said it'd just be for a couple days until Eli was back on his feet. Back then, I was only 22, fresh out of community college with no idea what I really wanted to do. I'd moved to a town called Elmstead, Ohio. Small, boring, but cheap, and with a couple of motels along the interstate that were always hiring. The Ridgeway Motor Lodge wasn't fancy by any stretch, just 30 rooms, cracked asphalt lot, and a neon sign that buzzed louder than it lit up. I'd only been working there for 4 months, mostly housekeeping, sometimes helping out at the front desk. The pay was shit, but I got free breakfast and didn't have to deal with people too often. Except for the occasional loud guest or couples trying to sneak in without IDs, it was fine. My mom always told me to avoid night jobs, especially in places with cheap locks and long shadows. She worked front desk at a roadside inn back in the 80s, and the stuff she told me kept me up more than once. But I brushed it off. That kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore, right? Wrong. It started with a man checking in under the name Glenn Ford. He was maybe mid-30s, tall, wiry, and polite in that practice kind of way. Aviator shades, even though it was pushing 7 p.m. and cloudy. He slid a credit card across the desk and asked for a room farthest from the office. "You here on business?" I asked, making idle conversation as I typed in the details. He gave a tight smile. Something like that. Room 103. It was the second to last room in the long row of single-floor units, close to the overgrown woods that edged the property. He didn't ask for Wi-Fi, didn't need a map, didn't ask for the complimentary breakfast time. Just took the key, nodded, and walked off with one black duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I remember watching him go, something about the way he moved. It wasn't stiff exactly, but controlled, like he was hyper-aware of his limbs, as if trying not to draw attention even though he already had mine. The first few nights passed without incident. Housekeeping left a note in the log that room 103 still had the Do Not Disturb tag on the handle. It wasn't uncommon. Some guests didn't like others touching their things. But after a week, I started to notice little things. The trash in the front lot kept getting rearranged, like someone was digging through it. Not all of it, just a couple bags from the end near 103. Then there was the weird request Glenn made when I called to check if he wanted fresh towels. "No need," he said quickly. "I bring my own." Not brought. Bring. Like he wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. By the end of the second week, his card had been charged for 14 days. No checkout, no housekeeping entry, and every time I passed his room on my way to log meter readings or do rounds, that little cardboard tag dangled from the knob like a dead leaf. One night I stayed a little later after shift. Eli was still sick and Mr. Densley was out of town. I figured I'd catch up on some laundry since we'd had a few last-minute check-ins. I was in the back room folding sheets when the power flickered. It didn't go out, not fully, just flickered once, twice. Then I heard a soft thump outside, like someone had dropped a heavy bag. I waited, listening. Another thump. I stepped outside through the back laundry exit, squinting into the dark. The motion lights were out, and the lot was coated in that soft yellow glow from the office windows. Everything was quiet, except room 103's door was open, just a crack. I froze. No sound, no movement, just that narrow black slit, like a mouth waiting to speak. "Sir?" I called, my voice cracking from nerves. "Is everything all right?" Nothing. I crept closer, shoes crunching gravel. The door creaked slightly in the breeze. When I finally reached it and pushed it gently open, I saw nothing. No guest. Just a musty room that stank of damp towels and old sweat. The curtains were drawn, the lights off. The bed was rumpled, but no sign of Glenn. And worst of all, there was no Do Not Disturb tag on the knob anymore. He was gone. I went back to the desk and called the number he'd written on his registration card. It was disconnected. The credit card info checked out, but it was prepaid and untraceable. I reported it to Mr. Densley the next morning, but he just waved it off. Guy probably skipped town. Left you a mess to clean is all. Except that wasn't all. When I went back to clean the room, I noticed a smell. Faint, but off. Like mildew mixed with copper. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The closet. That's when I saw the box. It was wedged into the back corner of the closet, taped shut with thick, gray duct tape. I bent down cautiously and touched it. Heavy. Too heavy. And wet. The bottom looked like it had been soaked through with something reddish-brown. My stomach twisted. I grabbed a pair of latex gloves from the housekeeping cart and pulled it out. It left a smear across the carpet. "What the hell?" I muttered. I didn't open it. Something in me, instinct maybe, screamed, "Don't." I called the police instead. What happened next changed everything. They came in, questioned me, questioned the staff, checked the security footage, which of course had mysteriously cut out for room 103 the night before Glenn disappeared. They opened the box. One of the officers turned green. The other muttered, "Jesus Christ." Inside wasn't a whole body, just a head. Wrapped in a torn motel towel. Female, brunette, probably early 20s. It took weeks to identify her. She'd been missing for over a month. A waitress from the next county over. Her name was Riley Mendez. And Glenn? If that was even his name? Vanished. Gone without a trace. The card he used was tied to an elderly man who died months prior. No leads. No closure. I quit the motel 3 weeks later. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't walk past a closet without feeling like something was watching. Sometimes I still dream about that room. I'm back there cleaning. Everything looks normal at first. Then I smell it. That sharp metallic stench. The kind that settles in your nose and never really leaves. I turn to the closet. The door creaks open. And I see the box again. Only this time, it's breathing. I used to work the evening shift at a small roadside motel just outside of Marlow, Nebraska. It wasn't much to look at, just a single row of rooms, a little diner attached, and a patch of gravel lot with cracked yellow paint marking the spaces. But it was a paycheck, and after bouncing between dead-end jobs for years, I didn't have the luxury of being picky. Back then, I had just moved out of a rough situation with my ex and was crashing in a friend's basement until I saved enough for my own place. I took the motel job mostly because it came with free dinner from the attached diner and the hours didn't interfere with my early morning community college classes. Plus, I figured the quiet nights would give me time to study, maybe get my life on track. The motel was called Red Pines Inn, though there wasn't a pine tree in sight. It was old, like built in the 40s and barely touched since old. There were stories, of course. Every place like that has them. But the one that stuck out was about room 6C. People said it was haunted by a headless woman who used to live in the area back when the motel was something fancier. Supposedly, she hung herself in one of the rooms and wasn't found for weeks. I didn't believe it. Not at the time. I heard the story from this guy named Davey, a long-timer who worked the front desk before me. He was one of those guys who believed every strange thing that came out of someone's mouth. "Don't mess around back by room 6C after dark," he'd say with a smirk. "She don't like company." I rolled my eyes every time. Ghost stories never scared me. People scared me. The real kind. The ones that stalked you, hit you, left you in pieces. Ghosts were for movies. And for the first few months, nothing happened. Nothing even close. I clocked in, handed out room keys, cleaned up coffee spills in the lobby, restocked vending machines, and sometimes delivered a forgotten toothbrush or towel. That was it. Just boring, quiet nights. Until that night with the sisters. It was early February, the kind of cold that slices through your jacket and makes your bones ache. That night the wind was howling across the flat Nebraska plains, flinging grit against the windows. I was on shift with Marcy, the cook who ran the diner from 4 to 10. She was about 60, short, feisty, and smoked like a chimney. She told me we were expecting some guests that the owner, Mr. Klein, knew personally, 2 elderly sisters, Agnes and Loretta. They came maybe 2 or 3 times a year, always stayed for a few days in the same room, 6C, and apparently never paid a dime. Friends of the owner, special treatment. They always get a bottle of wine when they show up, Marcy said, handing me a key to the bar cabinet. Mr. Klein wants you to make it look like it was a surprise. Fancy it up a little, you know? Sure, I said, already mentally checking out. I'll make it look nice. I didn't think much of it. I'd never met the sisters before, but I'd heard about them. Regulars, polite, a little quirky, but harmless. Mr. Klein had a soft spot for them, and honestly, I figured that meant I'd better play along. They arrived just after 9 p.m., right before Marcy was about to close the diner. I saw them pull up from the front window, an old maroon sedan creeping into the lot like it was afraid to wake the building. I stayed out of sight like I was told, grabbed the wine, a half-decent Merlot we kept in the back for rare occasions, poured it into 2 glasses and set it on a tray with a cloth napkin underneath. I slipped out the back door of the diner with the tray, careful to be quiet. The idea was to leave it in their room before they got settled, make it seem like it had been waiting for them all along. I had the key already. Mr. Klein wanted the whole thing to feel like a thoughtful touch. That's when things started to go sideways. The path between the diner and the motel rooms curved along a narrow concrete walkway lit by old amber bulbs mounted under the eaves. One of the lights just ahead of room 6C was flickering. Annoying, but not unusual. I remember thinking someone should fix it before it burned out completely. As I reached the door to 6C, I turned the handle slowly and slipped inside. The room smelled faintly of dust and floral cleaner, the same as all the others. I set the tray on the small dresser next to the TV, fluffed the pillows a bit to sell the whole welcome vibe, and quietly slipped back out. That's when I saw her. At the far end of the walkway, right beneath the flickering light, stood a figure in a long, pale nightgown. I stopped dead. She wasn't moving. I couldn't see a face. In fact, I couldn't see a head. From where I stood, it looked like she was completely headless, like her shoulders just rose into nothing. My chest clenched. My breath caught halfway up my throat. My first thought, ridiculous as it was, it's her. The ghost. The one Davy used to joke about. The headless woman of 6C. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. But in that moment, with the wind whistling and the light stuttering above her, it didn't feel funny. It felt wrong. Cold wrong. Like the kind of fear that bypasses logic and grabs you by the ribs. Then she moved. She turned toward me. Slowly. And that's when I realized it wasn't a ghost at all. It was one of the sisters. Loretta, I'd find out later. She was hunched so far forward, her chin was nearly touching her chest. Her spine curled like a question mark, her frail body barely able to support her head. From behind, with the light playing tricks and the way she stood, it really did look like she had no head. She gave me this look, sharp, unimpressed. And when she spoke, her voice was gravel. "You ought to fix that light, young man," she said, nodding toward the flickering bulb. I was still trying to breathe again. Yes, ma'am, sorry. You startled me is all." She huffed, turned, and walked off toward her room, disappearing inside 6C without another word. I stood there like an idiot for another full minute, heart pounding, hand still holding the now empty keycard. It should have ended there, but it didn't. I must have stood there in the break room for a solid minute, heart thudding so hard it made my vision pulse, trying to decide whether what I saw really happened, or if my mind had just cracked under the pressure of a long shift and too much caffeine. But it had happened. That light, that figure, the lack of a head, and the way she moved like her bones might crumble with each step. I shook it off and told myself it had to have been one of the guests, maybe someone with a severe spinal issue or just really hunched over. That had to be it. but something about it didn't sit right. Something about how she turned, how she moved, like she was floating but still somehow dragging her limbs as if they were too heavy for her frame. I got through the rest of the shift in a kind of daze. My co-worker Rosa came in around 5 a.m. for the early breakfast prep, and I think I jumped 3 feet when I heard the door open. She gave me this look like I was losing it. I probably was. That morning I had to hand the keys to the 2 elderly sisters, Margaret and Eileen, so I walked over to the diner where they were having their complimentary breakfast. And there they were, real as daylight, sitting and chatting, their plates half finished. Normal, cheerful, very much alive. But that's when my stomach twisted again. The one I'd seen under that flickering light? She wasn't either of them. I asked carefully, "Did you both get in all right last night?" Margaret smiled. "Oh yes, the boys took our luggage in and we turned in early. Didn't leave the room once, not even for tea. After all that driving, we were exhausted." I asked one more question before I could stop myself. "Did anyone else come with you? Or were there any other older guests who arrived last night?" Eileen frowned. "Just us, dear. The place was quiet as the grave. I excused myself quickly after that. I checked the security cameras later that day. Call it curiosity, or maybe some part of me hoping I'd see something that made logical sense. But of course, this is where things took a turn. The hallway camera near room 12, right where the light flickered, glitched out. Just that one. The file jumped from 10:03 p.m. to 10:07 p.m. in a clean cut, with a static blur where the footage should have been. Every other camera worked just fine. That gap was exactly the time I'd walked through there with the wine. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? That I saw a floating old woman with no head, and the camera conveniently glitched out? That it scared me more than any break-in or fire drill ever had? I could barely believe it myself. But from that night on, I started paying attention to the stories. The old legend the staff talked about, the woman who had died alone in one of the rooms and hadn't been found for weeks, the smell, the flies, the mattress stain that no one could quite bleach out, and the detail that always seemed like the stupidest part, the bit about her head falling off because of the rot. I used to laugh at it, but now I just listen quietly. I stayed at that motel for another month, but I never walked that hallway after dark again, and I never, ever looked at that flickering light for more than a second. I quit not long after. Said it was for school, or better pay. That was a lie. I just couldn't shake the feeling that if I stayed, I'd eventually see her again. And next time she wouldn't just walk away, just walk. It started with a vacancy sign flickering under a dim yellow light at the edge of a forgotten road, barely a speck on any map. The Silver Pine Motel, tucked between dense woods and rusted highway signs, had long lost its appeal to travelers. But it had guests. Always had guests. Locals in Ravenshade, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, whispered about the motel, not because of ghost stories or haunted rooms, but because people vanished there, quietly, without a trace. But rumors are just that, right? This is not a ghost story. This is the horrifyingly real tale of the Hollow Men, a group whose taste for blood, mutilation, and perverse rituals turned a decaying motel into a slaughterhouse, masquerading as a place to rest your head. Between 1980 and 1983, a disturbing pattern began to emerge across the mid-Atlantic. Missing women, mostly drifters, sex workers, or those struggling with addiction. The kind of people police departments sadly didn't prioritize, but the disappearances had a pattern. The last known location was always somewhere within a 50-mile radius of Ravenshade. The epicenter? Silver Pine Motel. It took years for law enforcement to even consider the possibility that these weren't random disappearances, until one woman survived. May 12, 1983, Ivy Malone, 24, was last seen hitchhiking outside Newbridge, heading toward a cousin's house in Charleston Hollow. She was found 3 days later, stumbling barefoot along a dirt road, her body covered in bruises, her left arm broken in 2 places. But what horrified investigators more was her chest. Her left breast had been crudely sliced as if someone had attempted to remove it with a dull blade. When she awoke in the hospital, she whispered one word to detectives: Motel. Detectives Ron Maddox and Teresa Harlan were assigned to the case. They drove Ivy around the area, and when they neared Silver Pine, she began to hyperventilate. "That's where they took me," she said, trembling. "The one with the broken N in the sign. They had a room at the far end, 3 men. One of them, he made the others call him Father." She described them in chilling detail. A short, wiry man with greasy black hair and a crooked smile. A large, heavy-set man with a lazy eye and a tendency to hum church hymns. And the worst of them all, Father Marcus. A calm, clean-shaven man in his 40s who wore a priest's collar but never spoke of God. Ivy claimed they weren't just torturing their victims, they were worshiping something. In the motel room, she'd seen a crude altar built from motel furniture, candles, bones, and jars, filled with preserved flesh. One jar, she swore, contained a human breast. Father Marcus would chant in Latin. The heavy-set man would cry while cutting the victims. The wiry one, Ivy remembered, would always record the rituals with an old camcorder. After Ivy's statement, police obtained a warrant. They raided room 19 of the Silver Pine Motel, but the hollow men were gone. What they found inside made seasoned detectives gag. A stained mattress nailed to the floor, bloodstains scrubbed, but still visible. A wooden box beneath the sink, inside which were 14 preserved body parts, including 5 human breasts. Polaroids, over 2 dozen, showing mutilated bodies in various stages of decomposition. But no tapes, no Father Marcus, no accomplices. Digging deeper, Detective Harlan traced Father Marcus's real identity to a man named Gareth Moeller, once a theology student at a seminary in Ohio. Expelled in 1973 for disturbing behavior involving dead animals, Gareth disappeared for years. He resurfaced in 1980 in Ravenshade, running a men's spiritual group out of a rented barn on the outskirts of town. Locals described Gareth as charming, persuasive. He recruited outcasts, ex-convicts, drifters, deeply broken men. He promised them salvation through the offering, a ritual sacrifice to something he called the Hollow God. Gareth didn't just kill, he converted. By late 1983, authorities linked at least 18 disappearances to the Hollow Men. April Denning, last seen walking home from a gas station 2 blocks from Silver Pine. Melissa Rayburn, a college student who stopped to ask for directions. Kendra Avery, abducted from a truck stop after her shift ended. Each case followed the same pattern. Left breast removed, throat slit, body dumped in wooded areas or back roads within 20 miles of the motel. In 1984, a breakthrough occurred. A former motel cleaning woman, Anita Grossman, turned in a box she found in the attic of the motel office. Inside were 3 VHS tapes labeled with only dates. They showed grainy footage of what looked like rituals, candles flickering, chanting, and the worst, the victims, crying, pleading, tied to the motel bed. Their screams were muffled with loud classical music. The final tape showed Gareth Moeller speaking directly to the camera. "We are not monsters. We are vessels. We do not kill. We release." 2 years after Ivy's escape, investigators arrested Daniel Tuck, the heavyset man, and Jasper Keene, the wiry one, in an abandoned house in Guthrie County. Both had changed their names and appearance but couldn't erase the tattoos Gareth had given them, symbols matching the ones found at the motel. Daniel cracked first. Through sobs, he described what Gareth made them do, how they were forced to eat pieces of the victims, how Gareth kept a box of preserved parts he called the harvest. But Gareth? He vanished. His name never appeared on any government record after 1985. Some say he changed his identity. Others believe he died. The most chilling theory? He's still out there, recruiting, Waiting. Daniel Tuck was sentenced to life without parole. Jasper Keene took a plea deal and was given 45 years. Ivy Malone disappeared into witness protection. The Silver Pine Motel was demolished in 1986, but the land was never resold. Today, locals avoid the site. They claim it's cursed, that the ground itself smells of blood after heavy rains, that sometimes, if you park nearby, your radio will crackle to life and play the same haunting classical music used in the tapes. And every year, on May 12th, someone leaves a single sealed jar on the ruins of Room 19. Inside is always the same thing: a severed breast. Let this be a reminder. Monsters aren't under our beds. They rent the room next door. I still don't know why I said yes that day. Maybe it was the way Gary leaned against the office counter, rubbing his temples like the world was about to collapse if one more thing went wrong. Maybe it was the fact that I'd just gotten my second parking ticket of the month and was broke enough to consider pawning my headphones. Or maybe it was because, deep down, I was desperate to prove I could handle something more than folding towels and replacing broken light bulbs. Whatever the reason, that's how I found myself ankle-deep in a filthy pool at Clearwater Pines Motel, on the edge of a small town called Elk Rock, somewhere between Tallahassee and nowhere. Back then, I was a 20-year-old college sophomore, trying to juggle classes, a night job, and the occasional weekend shift at the motel just off Highway 319. Clearwater Pines wasn't glamorous, but it wasn't a dump either. It had charm: white stucco walls, green-trimmed doors, and a wide, kidney-shaped pool that tourists loved to photograph for Instagram. At least, they did before the storm. 3 days of heavy Florida rain had turned that pool into a graveyard. Leaves, branches, drowned beetles, what looked like a raccoon tail, though I prayed it wasn't attached to the rest of the raccoon. The water had gone from crystal blue to murky green in less than 72 hours. Normally, we had a pool maintenance guy for this, an older dude named Cliff who came around with his truck and industrial-grade filter gear. But Gary told me Cliff was slammed with post-storm cleanups all across the county and wouldn't be able to make it for another week. "We're losing guests, Ben," Gary said, exasperated. "People see the pool like this and check right out." "So, what, you want me to clean it? If you get it done by the afternoon, I'll clock you out for a full shift and let you go early, plus a $50 bonus." Now, $50 might not sound like much, but to a broke college kid eating ramen and stealing napkins from gas stations, it was gold. So I shrugged, grabbed the long skimmer net, and headed to the back of the property with a towel around my neck and a pair of busted sunglasses. The heat was brutal. Mid-July in northern Florida always felt like someone pressing a wet sponge against your skin. I'd been scooping out leaves and soggy trash for maybe 30 minutes when she walked in. She wore a white sarong around her waist, sunglasses with gold frames, and a red bikini that looked brand new. Early 20s maybe. Tanned like she'd spent the last week doing nothing but lounging under the sun, confident, effortlessly. "Hey," she said, pausing at the pool gate. "Any idea how long before it's swim-worthy again?" I wiped sweat off my forehead with the back of my arm. "Depends. Right now it's a swamp. Might be a while." "Damn." She looked disappointed, then motioned to one of the loungers. "Mind if I just chill here for a bit?" "Sure. It's your funeral," I said, half joking. "This water's seen things." She laughed and sat down, pulling a bottle of sunscreen from her bag and stretching out like she had all the time in the world. I tried to keep working, but it was impossible not to notice her, especially when she started asking questions. Casual stuff, small talk. "You work here full-time?" "Just weekends." "College?" "Yeah, Florida State University, business major. You?" "Just finished undergrad, psychology." "Ah, so you can read minds." "Only the dumb ones," she said, smirking. The conversation helped. I stopped thinking about how disgusting the pool was and just kept working. I managed to clear the shallow end almost entirely. The deep end still looked like a disaster, but it was a start. Then she asked the question that still plays in my head. You think it's okay if I just dip my feet in? I hesitated. The shallow end looked mostly clean. I glanced at the surface and clearish. No visible bugs, no floating debris. Yeah, should be fine. Just your feet, though. She slid off her sarong, sat at the edge of the pool, and lowered her legs into the water. I turned back to my work, still holding the net, when something caught my eye. A ripple. No. A movement. Tiny black shapes darting through the water, fast and low. At first I thought they were leaves, then fish. Then I saw the legs, angular, sharp, moving in impossible directions. They were coming from one of the intake vents. I froze. Hey, get your legs out, now! She looked confused. What? Out, I shouted. There's something in the... She followed my gaze, then screamed. And the scream didn't stop. She scrambled back, soaking wet, knees scraped on the tiles, yelling something incoherent as she ran off, barefoot and sobbing. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the water. They were everywhere now. At least a dozen. Huge, black, wet-looking creatures crawling up the tiled walls of the pool. Some floated, some swam. All of them heading toward where her legs had just been. If you've never seen a Florida giant water bug up close, count yourself lucky. People call them toe biters. They look like something out of a nightmare. Wide, oval bodies, long, spiny legs, and pincers that don't mess around. They're not venomous, but they do bite. And not in a, hey, that stings kind of way. More like, holy hell, what just took a chunk out of me? I dropped the net and backed away. I told Gary I wasn't finishing the job. Come on, Ben, they won't hurt you. They bite, man. And they fake dead. Cliff needs to deal with this. He groaned, but relented. Told me to drag some lounge chairs over and close off the pool until Cliff could come out. Said to put up a sign, pool closed for maintenance. Cliff showed up the next day in a hazmat-style jumpsuit. He poured gallons of vinegar and chlorine into the water, wore gloves up to his elbows, told me in a deadpan voice, "These things? They'll play dead for hours, then crawl right out of the skimmer basket." I didn't sleep that night. Riley, that was her name, never came back to the pool. She left the motel the next morning, told the front desk she was cutting her vacation short, didn't even ask for a refund. Weeks passed. The pool was cleaned, refilled, reopened, but I still saw them. Not the bugs, the shapes. That day, just before they swarmed the surface, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't an animal. It was a hand. Pale, slim, just under the surface. Reaching up. I didn't tell anyone about the hand. Not Gary, not Cliff, not even my roommate back on campus. What would I say? That I saw something under the water, maybe a hand, in the middle of a heat wave, after barely sleeping and sweating through my shirt? Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was the glare. Maybe I just wanted an excuse. Something dramatic to justify why I walked away from a $50 bonus and an easy shift. But even now, I sometimes think about it. Not just the bugs or the pool or Riley bolting like she'd seen a ghost. I think about that moment when everything felt off. Like I wasn't alone in that water. Like something was waiting. Gary offered me a couple more weekend shifts after that, but I never took them. I told him school was picking up, midterms, papers, whatever excuse came to mind. Truth is, I didn't want to go back. I'd drive past Clearwater Pines sometimes. The pool looks fine now. Sparkling blue, inflatable swans, kids playing like nothing ever happened. And maybe nothing did. Maybe. But I never swim in motel pools anymore. Especially not after a storm. And if I ever see something move under the surface that shouldn't be there, I don't wait around to find out what it is. I walk away. Because sometimes saying yes to something small, something as simple as cleaning a pool, opens up a door you didn't know was there. And not everything on the other side wants to be found. I was just 19 when I started working at the Horizon Pines Motel just off Highway 16, a few miles out from the little town of Summerfield, Nebraska. If you blinked, you'd miss the whole town. Gas station, diner, and a liquor store that never checked IDs. I was working 2 jobs back then, trying to scrape together tuition money for my first semester at the local community college. My main gig was nights at a gas station, but the early mornings? Housekeeping at that dingy, sun-bleached motel. The job was simple enough. Strip the beds, wipe the counters, restock the tiny bottles of shampoo, and pray you didn't walk in on someone still high, half naked, or both. Summerfield had a bad meth problem, and the Horizon Pines was ground zero. Every other room had a story. Some we talked about, most we didn't. But room 209? That one we still talked about. It was late July, the kind of summer heat that makes the air shimmer and your brain feel like it's melting. I was teamed up with Maribel, a middle-aged Guatemalan woman with a gold cross necklace she never took off. Real sweet lady. Didn't speak much English, but she could clean a room like nobody's business. There was also Caleb, a lanky white kid with buzzed hair and tattoos he probably got off a Pinterest board. He mostly came in late, hungover or still high from the night before, but he worked fast. We had a system. Maribel would start on the second floor, I'd take the first, and Caleb would bounce between the two, picking up whichever rooms we skipped. We'd leapfrog each other every third room or so no one got stuck doing all the gross ones. That day was just like any other. Sweat-soaked uniforms, the hum of box fans in open doorways, and the occasional weird smell you learned not to ask about. I was wiping down the counter in room 203 when I heard Maribel shout, "Dios mío." I froze. She never raised her voice. I dropped my rag, ran out, and bolted down the walkway to 209, where her voice had come from. Caleb was already there, standing just inside the door with a weird look on his face, half confused, half scared. Maribel was standing in the middle of the room, hands pressed together over her cross like she was praying, whispering under her breath. Her eyes were glued to the ceiling. "What the hell's going on?" I asked. Caleb just pointed up. At first, I didn't get it. The room looked clean. Fresh towels, made bed, window open, letting in a strip of bright light. Then I looked up, way up. There were footprints on the ceiling, not like smudges or watermarks. Actual dirty, bare footprints, clear as day, as if someone had walked up the wall and kept going across the ceiling. The pattern ended right at the window, where the glass was broken at the very top. The window started about chest height and ran to the ceiling, like one of those fancy full-light windows you only see in brochures. My stomach turned, not from fear, but confusion. It didn't make sense. Maybe someone climbed up and, I don't know, fell through, I offered. Caleb shook his head. There's no way. Look at the wall. No scuff marks, no furniture moved. And those prints are on the ceiling, not halfway up. On it, Maribel started crying quietly. Just soft little gasps. She kept her eyes on the ceiling like she was afraid to blink. I put my arm around her, but she kept whispering prayers. She thinks it's something evil, Caleb muttered, eyes still on the prints. I looked around. No blood, no broken furniture, no signs of a struggle. Just those damn footprints, clean bed sheets, and that shattered window at the top. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just off. Like the air in the room was thicker than it should be. We finished our shift in silence that day. No jokes, no music playing from Caleb's speaker. Just a weird tension. Maribel refused to go back into 209 ever again. Even when management reassigned rooms, she'd find someone to trade with. I started taking 209 myself. I wasn't scared. I mean, come on, we're in meth country. People tweak out and do all kinds of crazy stuff. I figured maybe 2 guys got high as hell. One tossed the other in the air. Maybe the other guy got his feet up there somehow before they crashed down and broke the window. I mean, you'd be amazed what the human body can do when it thinks it's invincible. But still, Every time I cleaned that room after, I'd find myself glancing up. Even though they repainted the ceiling, I could still see those prints in my mind. I always cleaned fast, never listened to music, and never ever turned my back to the window. I grew up in Summerfield. Poor, single mom. My dad skipped out before I was born. We lived in a trailer that barely had working heat in the winter. I was determined to make something of myself. College was my ticket out, but school cost money, and I didn't have any. So I worked. Gas station graveyard shifts, housekeeping in the mornings. I averaged 4 hours of sleep on a good day. The motel gig was supposed to be temporary, just a stepping stone. But the weirdness of that place stuck with me longer than I ever expected. And room 209? That was the beginning. A couple weeks after the incident, I was cleaning 209 again. I just finished vacuuming when I noticed something behind the curtain. Not outside the window, inside the room, up near the ceiling. It was a handprint, a child-sized handprint, smudged into the glass like it had been pressed from the outside. I stepped closer. The room was on the second floor. No balcony, no ledge, nothing to climb. And yet, that little handprint was pressed against the upper half of the glass. I told no one, not Maribel, not Caleb, not even the manager, who I was pretty sure was high half the time himself. I wiped the glass and left. But that night, I didn't sleep. Isaac never thought that trying to sell a computer would lead him into the darkest chapter of his life. He just needed the money. It was the third week of September 1995 in the city of Knoxville, Tennessee, a quiet working-class town where the morning fog still rolled in thick over the Smoky Mountains and internet cafes were still something only cities like New York talked about. Isaac Dalton, a 24-year-old film student at the University of Tennessee, had finally hit the wall. His part-time gig editing wedding videos had dried up, and student loans were clawing at his throat. A year ago, he'd spent nearly $18,000 on a top-of-the-line Macron Vertex 950, a sleek, powerful workstation that had 4 gigabytes of hard drive space and 32 megabytes of RAM. That might sound pitiful now, but in 1995, it was cutting edge. He had dreams of starting his own small production company, maybe even make documentaries or music videos for local bands. But life had other plans. Now he needed to sell the Vertex just to stay afloat. He listed it in the classified section of the Knoxville Daily News, a short, simple ad. For sale, Macron Vertex 950 workstation, 32 megabytes RAM, 4 gigabytes hard drive. Like new, $17,500, OBO, serious buyers only. Call 865-555-2913. Ask for Isaac. He expected scammers, low-ballers, maybe the occasional curious tech head. What he didn't expect was a call from someone who introduced himself as Thomas Reed, a freelance systems architect from Marietta, Georgia. Thomas sounded calm, intelligent. He said he'd been looking for that exact model for months. "I'm on contract with a private aerospace firm," he told Isaac. "This system would literally save my team weeks of work." The man spoke confidently with just enough tech jargon to sound convincing. Then he made an offer. "I'll give you $18,500 if you deliver it to me directly in Marietta. I'll cover fuel and lodging if needed. I just need it by the 24th. Isaac hesitated. Driving 4 hours for a handoff wasn't ideal, but that extra $1,000 could cover nearly 2 months of rent. "I'll take it," he said. He wasn't going alone. His fiancée, Claire Monroe, 23, a nursing student at Pellissippi State, insisted on going with him. "Someone offers you more than asking, changes the meeting location, and wants you to drive 4 hours," Claire said, arms crossed. "That's sketchy as hell. You're not doing this solo." Isaac chuckled, but she wasn't joking. Claire had a gut instinct for people, sharp, unshakable. She could smell bullshit through a phone line. Saturday, September 24th. They left before sunrise in Isaac's faded Honda Accord, the Vertex strapped safely in the back seat. It was a foggy, gray morning. The drive was long but uneventful. Interstate traffic, gas station coffee, quiet radio static. Thomas had said he would meet them at his office. But at 7:30 a.m., just 30 minutes outside Marietta, Isaac got a call. "I need to make a change," Thomas said. "The office park's entrance is under construction and it's a mess to get into. Let's meet at the Sunset Inn just off the I-75. Easier for everyone." Claire gave Isaac a look. "You sure this is a good idea?" she asked as they exited toward the motel. He nodded. "We're in broad daylight, it's just a handoff." They arrived at 8:15 a.m. The Sunset Inn was the kind of place you rent by the hour or for a night when you're too tired to keep driving. Faded green siding, cracked parking lot, a Coke machine that didn't work. Room 109. Thomas answered the door almost immediately. He looked normal. Average height, maybe 5'11", late 30s. Sandy brown hair, clean-shaven, thin frame. He wore khakis, a maroon sweater, and a polite smile. "Isaac, Claire, come on in." The room smelled faintly of air freshener and cigarettes. There was a laptop bag on the desk, the bed untouched. "Mind firing up the system?" he asked. "Just want to make sure everything works." Isaac opened the Vertex case, plugged it into the outlet. Everything booted fine. Thomas watched intently, nodding as Isaac demonstrated the specs and software. "This is perfect," he said. "My associate's bringing the cashier's check. He's just a few blocks out. Should be here in 15. They chatted for a bit. Thomas made jokes about how slow Marietta was to adopt technology, about the government's red tape. Then he said something odd. "You know, to save time, we could load the computer into my car. It'll make things easier once the check's in hand." Claire narrowed her eyes. "I think we'd rather wait until your associate gets here." Thomas smiled, his eyes flicking toward the motel door. "Of course. Just thought I'd offer." Another 10 minutes passed. Claire suggested they go grab coffee while they waited. They stepped out, walked to a nearby diner, and returned with coffee and biscuits. Still no associate. Thomas apologized. Traffic must be a nightmare. Isaac shifted uncomfortably. Claire was quiet. Then Thomas stood up. "I think we're ready to finish the deal," he said. He reached under the mattress and pulled out a small black revolver. "Lie down," he said calmly. "Wrap yourselves in the bed sheets. Don't speak. Don't move." Claire froze. "What are you doing?" Isaac whispered. "This'll be over soon," Thomas said. "I just need time to leave. No one gets hurt if you follow instructions." They lay on the floor, hearts racing, sheets around their arms, torsos. Isaac's fingers trembled. Claire's eyes were full of tears. Then came the first blow, a hammer, from nowhere, crashing down on Isaac's skull. He saw white, then black. He came to seconds later to Claire's screams. Thomas was standing over her, hammer raised, striking again and again. Isaac tried to move, to scream, but his limbs were jelly, his vision doubled. He blacked out again. When he awoke, the room was silent. The door creaked open, then closed. Thomas had returned to wipe down surfaces. Faucet running, the smell of bleach. Isaac heard a whisper in his head. "Play dead. Don't move. Don't breathe." Then the door slammed. This time, for good. It was 9:32 a.m. when a maid found Isaac crawling out of the room, soaked in blood, moaning for help. Claire died 2 hours later from massive skull trauma. Isaac survived, but was left with permanent hearing loss, vertigo, and PTSD. The police found the hammer, still wrapped in its plastic SKU tag intact, but couldn't trace it. Witnesses described the suspect's car, a dark maroon Dodge Dynasty, red interior, Tennessee plates. A sketch was drawn, a public appeal was made, but no one came forward. 2 years later, a breakthrough. Police in Atlanta arrested a man named Martin Claiborne, a failed music producer with a history of scams and a chillingly similar MO. He was convicted of a brutal double homicide committed in a motel room in 1996. Same weapon, same setup, same lies. Martin was awaiting trial for a third killing, a former business partner, when he was found dead in his cell. A massive never got closure in court. No confession, no justice. In honor of Claire, her family created the Claire Monroe Nursing Scholarship at Pellissippi State. But fate wasn't done with Isaac. In 1999, while working with AmeriCorps in New Mexico, he was killed in a head-on collision. The other driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. Isaac was 28. And somewhere out there, if Martin Claiborne wasn't truly Thomas Reed, that monster might still be walking free, waiting for his next deal, his next motel, his next victim.